Coming to you live from Athens, Georgia, I'm Wilson Griffeth.
And I'm Molly Suggs.
On the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Since its founding, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC, has been almost overrun with rebel groups fighting for control of DRC's territory and numerous natural resources, particularly in the eastern region of the country. Most recently, the rebel group M23 already controls the Ituri, North and South Kivu, and Tanganyika regions, and is fighting for further control of the country, leaving millions affected by the conflict. The Congolese government has accused its neighboring country of Rwanda of backing these terrorists, while Rwanda denies these claims and purports that the DRC has instead been shelling Rwandan villages along the border. Many viewers may be wondering, what is the M23? How and why is Rwanda involved, and why has this conflict been plaguing the DRC for so long?
Following the Rwandan genocide, in which members of the Tutsi minority ethnic group, as well as some moderate Hutu, were killed by armed Hutu militias, many refugees from both groups fled into eastern DRC. Within these refugee enclaves, both Hutu and Tutsi extremist groups formed, inciting violence against one another. The First Congo War broke out in 1996 when the Rwanda military, along with Congo-based Tutsi militias, invaded the DRC, then known as Zaire, under the premise that the Congolese government was harboring Hutu extremists and that the militant groups along the Rwanda-Congo border posed a distinct threat to Rwandan citizens. Rwanda ultimately won the war, installing Zaire's then opposition leader and Rwandan-supported Laurent Kabila as president of the DRC. The Second Congo War started in 1998 when relations between Kabila and Rwanda deteriorated and Kabila switched his alliances from Rwanda and the Tutsis to protecting the Hutus in the Congo because of the growing public resentment brought on by the influence of Rwanda in the DRC. Rwanda responded by invading once again. While the war ultimately ended in 2002 with the supposed agreement to peace accords establishing a transitional government led by Kabila's son, Joseph, tensions continued to rise between both the DRC and Rwanda and Hutus and Tutsis. There are still many rebel groups, with the one of international focus today being the March 23 movement, or M23, also known as the Congolese Revolutionary Army. This militia, made up of primarily ethnic Tutsis, was founded when a group of Congolese soldiers turned against their government, citing poor conditions in the army and the government's unwillingness to implement the 23 March 2009 agreement deal as its reasons for doing so. This peace deal was made between the military group and the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo after years of conflict between the groups, in which the group was absorbed into the National Army of the DRC. M23 has been operational since then, focusing on offensive efforts to gain control of land and resources in the eastern DRC. Rwanda has financially and otherwise supported this Tutsi-led group in its efforts against the DRC. There was a brief period of peace between M23 and Congo from 2013 to 2017 following M23 defeat by UN forces sent into the region to maintain peace. However, in 2017, the rebels resurged with remote attacks from an area between the borders of the DRC, Rwanda, and Uganda. These attacks achieved very little but gained more traction later in 2022 and have been growing since. What's the current situation like in the region, Wilson?
Well, the numerous proxy wars, accusations between governments, and failures at a ceasefire agreement are on the brink of pushing Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo into an open war. A historically long-standing strained relationship between the two countries, stemming from the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide, has spawned numerous paramilitary groups in the eastern portion of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In 2022, the violence between M23 and the Congo government escalated to an all-out armed rebellion, in which the M23 forces took control of a few towns. After the attacks of 2022, the DRC initially blamed Rwanda for planning and supporting the attacks. This does have historical precedence, as a leaked UN report showed that Rwanda funded and controlled the M23 during the first rebellion. The Rwandan government denied these allegations. Rwanda voiced counter-allegations that the DRC had shelled areas of Rwanda, escalating tensions between the two countries even further. As of February of 2023, the M23 control Bunagana, Kiwanja, Kitkanja, Rubaya, Rutshuru, as well as vital roads leading to Goma. M23's control has more effects than just the tensions between Rwanda and the DRC, as the conflict has displaced around 1 million people. This refugee crisis is just one of the symptoms of the conflict drawing attention from international human rights activists, as there have been reports of rape and other serious war crimes as well. The Human Rights Watch has urged international organizations such as the African Union and the United Nations to provide humanitarian aid to the to the DRC so that they can provide healthcare and socioeconomic health to victims of the violence. The United Nations has not been complacent in their efforts to help end the violence in the region, as they have sent troops in to support the DRC in their fight to suppress the rebels. However, this has not been viewed entirely positively by the people of the DRC, as many want them gone due to their ineffectiveness. In fact, in September of this year, President Felix Tshisekedi informed the UN that he wants them to accelerate their withdrawal from the region so as to start a year earlier, in December of 2023. Regardless of the status of the UN withdrawal, violence and the horrors that accompany it show no signs of slowing down. Molly, what are some of the overarching factors that may influence what happens next?
Well, Wilson, these go by many names. This one in particular goes by many names. The paradox of plenty, the resource trap, the Dutch curse, and more commonly, the resource curse. The Democratic Republic of Congo has an abundance of natural resources that at first glance would suggest that the DRC would be a very well-developed first world country. Instead, the inverse seems to be true. Why is that? The answer lies in the resource curse theory, the pattern of many natural resource-rich countries being subject to increased out-of-state intervention, political corruption, and exploitation. Instead of natural resources bolstering a state, the state instead experiences negative effects on the social and economic well-being. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, this curse is most felt in the correlation between resources and conflict. This cycle of internal conflict after internal conflict, coupled with a myriad of militia groups across the country, is perpetuated by the resource curse in two main ways. Being the catalyst of corruption leads to a weak government incapable of stopping these groups and ample resources to fund these rebel groups. Another contributing factor is fragile states. States that have lost one of the core tenets of stateship are considered fragile states or failing states. These pillars of stateship include territory, permanent population, ability to interact with other states, and outright authority to use power within their borders. The Democratic Republic of the Congo fulfills these three. However, numerous militia groups in the region that periodically occupy regions called into question whether the Democratic Republic of the Congo has the outright monopoly on use of power in the region. Furthermore, most functions expected of a national government are barely functioning, if at all. However, many would argue that the DRC is not a failing state at all. It is simply a state with a larger wealth gap than most. After all, there are many elites that enjoy a very high standard of life, a life won by exploiting the people and resources of the DRC. Through allowing the state's armed forces to pay themselves via abuse of their citizens, manipulating mining contracts and state's assets, and underspending on public goods, the people in power and the regime-connected elite are able to enjoy a very reasonable standard of living. However, simply because the 1%ers are able to exploit the nation to a point of being successful, this does not measure up to the state of being successful. The point still stands that the government barely provides the services expected of it, and small militias are in control over many regions of the country. So while the DRC may not be a failed state, it should certainly be classified as failing. So if the DRC is a failing state suffering from the resource curse, what does this mean for what's going to happen in ongoing conflict?
Well, the situation is tumultuous. Let's discuss what's to come for the situation. There is minimal hope for a successful, sustainable resolution for these groups to come, at least not anytime soon, that is. With the precedents of the two previous Congo wars, it's increasingly likely that another may happen, and that foreign and domestic violence will continue. In 2022, there was a 12% increase in the overall number of attacks compared to 2021, and there are no signs of that slowing down. Rwanda's President Kagame warned that the threats emanating from eastern DRC were grave enough to warrant a Rwandan deployment without the DRC's approval. He said, "We do what we must do, with or without the consent of others." This is more explicit and grave language used than ever before by the Rwandan government. War is seeming more and more imminent. What will happen to the millions of displaced people in eastern DRC as these attacks continue? If war breaks out, the refugee crisis will continue to spiral. It's fair to predict that there may be no place for these people to go, the ones internally displaced and refugees from neighboring states. There's potential for greater UN involvement to deal with the crisis, but that is already being resisted by the Congolese people. Congo is also holding a presidential election on December 20th in this tense political climate. Current President Tshisekedi is running for re-election under harsh criticism after the murders of several opposition leaders, as well as widespread distrust in the credibility of elections in the country, and extensive reports of corruption in Tshisekedi and his predecessor Kabila's governments. From Foreign Policy magazine, more than 1 million people in eastern DRC have been left without voter cards, and some eastern towns will be excluded altogether from voting due to the security concerns in the region. While Tshisekedi is projected to win the election, there is widespread support for Moise Katumbi, another candidate, who promises to consolidate peace, democracy, and fight corruption. These promises, however, are unlikely to be fulfilled, simply due to the enormity of the issues facing the prospective president. Regardless of who wins this election, it is likely that war is in the near future between the DRC and Rwanda.
Thank you.